It is obvious for anyone with little goodwill and insight to see the extent and dominion of religious fanaticism in the Algerian society. Most Algerians blindly believe that they are the possessors of absolute truth, the word of God, thus assuming that their so-called religious life is a pure and true spiritual experience of the divine. The truth, however, from a psychological perspective, is that most of them, not to say all of them, are living in a state of deplorable psychological stagnation, grounded on a rotten body of moral conventions. Most of them are, like Jung would call them, adherents of a creed. A creed coincides with the established church in our case, the mosque, or, at any rate, forms a public institution whose members include not only true believers, but vast numbers of people who can only be described as indifferent in matters of religion and who belong to it simply by force of habit. To be the adherent of a creed, therefore, is not always a religious matter, but more often a social one. The Arabo-Muslim tradition throughout history processed through the collective unconscious of these people, shaped the image of the typical good Muslim, the paladin of God, a figure consisting of typical traits, mentality, behavior and historical achievements that makes their collective identity. All fall in an ego identification with this figure, resulting in a complete dissolution of the personality in the ocean of collective elements. And since their belief is not resting on any kind of rigid spiritual or intellectual support, it is not strange that the emotional tension of such groups rises to a level of excitement leading to violent assault against any rising element of opposition: homosexuals, atheists, other beliefs, feminism, etc. etc. The fact that the state is compromised with religion actually makes it almost impossible to see any considerable opposition on the political ground. Insofar as society is itself composed of de-individualized human beings, it is completely at the mercy of ruthless individualists. Let it band together into groups and organizations as much as it likes, it is just this banding together and the resultant extinction of the individual personality that makes it succumb so readily to a dictator. What is more striking, when interacting with the oppressed minorities, is the many psychological similarities that they share with their oppressors. A lot of these silenced individuals, in a slightly more complex way, fall into the same trap of group identity. A lot of them seem to find shelter amongst the Western communities of LGBT, communists, feminists, etc. And just like the Algerian Muslim reflecting a typical figure, the Algerian oppressed, gay, atheist, Christian, or whatever, also goes straight into an ego identification with a so celebrated Western woke figure, which also bears a set of certain traits, mentality, behavior, intellectual properties and historical achievements that makes the collective identity of these groups. It was very strange when an Algerian gay person assumed that I, as a heterosexual, wouldn't understand their need of identifying with certain LGBT symbols, such as pride flags, because only them know the tumults of the fight for earning their rights while, as far as I am concerned, no gay opposition or resistance has ever flourished on the Algerian socio-political field. Let me then, in the same instant, introduce myself as the atheist who underwent the hardships of Les Lumières against the Algerian religious oppression. Being caught in the social and/or intellectual ease and comfort that is provided by the belonging to the collectively presumed true path, the right side, the enlightened, which is resting on a very fragile ground of conscious intellectual and psychological backing and conviction, is the reason why it is often the case that the emotional atmosphere amongst these groups rises exceedingly when confronted against the slightest or even most legitimate contradiction. Rational argument can be conducted with some prospect of success only so long as the emotionality of a given situation does not exceed a certain critical degree. If the effective temperature rises above this level, the possibility of reasons having any effect ceases and its place is taken by slogans and chimerical wish fantasies. That is to say, a sort of collective possession results which rapidly develops into a psychic epidemic. This usually leads to mass shadow projection upon the other side. This is clearly seen through the trending notions of, for example, manspreading, mansplaining, which are hinting to a severe animist possession amongst the feminist groups. The result, as always in such cases, is overcompensation in the form of fanaticism, which in its turn is used as a weapon for stamping out the least flicker of opposition. Free opinion is stifled and moral decision ruthlessly suppressed. This is exactly the case with the actual reigning atmosphere of wokeism and cancel culture in the West, which shows us an example of flipping the table over the other side, which is just a changing of the direction of oppression. As many other historical events portray the same reversal of situation, like the dictatorship of the proletariat and its position regarding the individual freedom.